Bear Cub was locked in a refrigerated truck, racing downhill. What this baby did was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The morning air was crisp in the small mountain town of Cedar Valley. Mia Chen sat on her porch, gently rocking her 8-month-old daughter Luna in her arms. The baby's dark eyes sparkled as she watched the world wake up around them. Birds chirped in the pine trees, and somewhere in the distance, a truck engine hummed along the winding mountain road. Luna giggled and reached for a butterfly that danced near the porch railing. Her tiny fingers opened and closed as if trying to catch the delicate creature. Mia smiled, her heart swelling with love as she watched her daughters wonder at the simple beauty around them. "Look at that, sweetheart," Mia whispered, pointing to the butterfly. "Isn't it pretty?" Luna babbled in response, her voice mixing with the peaceful sounds of the morning. The truck's engine grew louder, but it was just another delivery passing through their quiet town. Nothing unusual, nothing to worry about. But as the rumble of the engine faded into the distance, something else caught Mia's attention. A faint sound, almost like crying, drifted on the wind. She tilted her head, listening carefully. It was probably just her imagination, or maybe a neighbor's cat. Luna suddenly stopped reaching for the butterfly. Her little body tensed in Mia's arms, and she turned her head toward the road, as if she had heard something too. The baby's expression changed from playful curiosity to something deeper, something that made Mia's heart skip a beat. "What is it, little one?" Mia asked softly, following Luna's gaze toward the empty road. The sound came again, clearer this time. It wasn't a cat, it wasn't the wind. It was definitely crying, and it sounded scared, desperate. Luna's tiny hand gripped Mia's shirt, and she let out a small whimper, her eyes wide with concern. Mia stood up, holding Luna close to her chest. The crying sound was moving away from them, following the path of the truck that had just passed. But trucks carried cargo, not crying creatures, unless... A chill ran down Mia's spine as she realized what she might be hearing. She looked down at Luna, who was staring at the road with an intensity that seemed impossible for such a young child. The baby's eyes were filled with tears, as if she understood that somewhere out there someone needed help. "We should go inside," Mia said, but even as she spoke the words, she found herself walking toward the edge of the porch instead. The crying was getting fainter, more distant, but Luna's distress was growing stronger. The baby started to squirm in her arms, making urgent little sounds that Mia had never heard before. It was as if Luna was trying to tell her something important, something that couldn't wait. Down the mountain road, the refrigerated truck continued its journey, its driver completely unaware of the precious cargo hidden in the back. Inside the cold, dark space, a small bear cub pressed against the metal walls, its cries growing weaker with each passing minute. The driver, Jake Sullivan, had been on the road for 6 hours straight. His eyes felt heavy, and his mind wandered as he gripped the steering wheel. He was thinking about his own daughter back home, wondering if she would still be awake when he finally made it back from this delivery run. The radio crackled with old country songs, and Jake hummed along, completely oblivious to the tragedy unfolding just a few feet behind him. Meanwhile, Mia felt her heart racing as Luna continued to cry in her arms. The baby's distress was unlike anything she had experienced before. Luna's small fingers clutched at Mia's shirt, and her eyes remained fixed on the road where the truck had disappeared. "Shh, honey, it's okay," Mia whispered, but her own voice trembled with uncertainty. She walked back toward the house, but Luna's crying only grew louder. The baby arched her back and pointed toward the road, her face red with the effort of trying to communicate something urgent. Mia's neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, appeared at her garden gate with a concerned expression. She was an elderly woman who had lived in Cedar Valley her entire life and had raised 5 children of her own. "Is everything all right, dear?" Mrs. Patterson called out, wiping dirt from her hands with a small towel. "I'm not sure," Mia replied, walking over to the fence that separated their properties. "Luna's been crying ever since that truck passed. And I thought I heard something crying from the truck itself." Mrs. Patterson's weathered face grew serious. "What kind of truck?" "A big one, white with some kind of refrigerated unit on the back. It was heading down toward the valley road." The older woman's eyes widened. That would be heading toward the old bridge then. That road gets mighty dangerous once you hit the steep part. She paused, looking at Luna, who was still pointing toward the road. "You know, I've seen a lot of babies in my time, and I've never seen one act like that unless something was really wrong." As if responding to Mrs. Patterson's words, Luna let out a wail that seemed to echo through the valley. The sound sent shivers down Mia's spine, and she noticed that other babies in nearby houses had started crying too. It was as if they were all connected by some invisible thread of distress. Back in the truck, the bear cub had given up trying to claw at the walls. The cold was seeping into its tiny body, making it drowsy and weak. Its mother's scent still lingered on its fur, a reminder of the warmth and safety it had known just hours before. The cub had wandered away from its mother while she was fishing in the stream, drawn by the sweet smell of honey that had somehow gotten into the back of the truck. But now the truck was moving, and the cub was trapped in a nightmare of cold and darkness. The truck hit a particularly rough patch of road, and Jake cursed under his breath as he struggled to maintain control. He was already running late for his delivery, and the company had been clear about the importance of this shipment. Ice cream for a children's party in the next town over. Nothing too exciting, but it paid the bills. What Jake didn't know was that the latch on the back of his truck had been damaged during his last stop. The door wasn't fully secured, and with each bump and turn it creaked and shifted. Inside, the bear cub could see thin slivers of light through the gaps, but it was too weak now to make much noise. Mia made a decision that surprised even herself. "Mrs. Patterson, can you watch Luna for just a minute? I want to call the sheriff's office and report what I heard." But as she tried to hand Luna to the older woman, the baby screamed and clung to her mother with surprising strength. Luna's eyes were wide with panic, and she kept pointing toward the road. "She doesn't want you to leave," Mrs. Patterson observed. "Maybe she's trying to tell you something else." Just then, another sound caught their attention. It was the distant roar of a motorcycle engine, growing louder as it approached from the same direction the truck had gone. Within moments, a young man on a dirt bike came racing up the mountain road, his face pale with urgency. He pulled up next to them and removed his helmet, revealing worried brown eyes and dark hair matted with sweat. "Excuse me, have you seen a refrigerated truck come through here? White one, heading down the mountain?" "Yes, about 10 minutes ago," Mia replied quickly. "Why? What's wrong?" The young man, who looked to be in his early 20s, ran a hand through his hair. "My name's David Chen. I work at the Wildlife Center down in the valley. We had a bear cub go missing early this morning, and one of our volunteers saw it near the loading docks where delivery trucks pick up supplies." He paused, catching his breath. "We think it might have climbed into one of the trucks by accident." Mia's blood ran cold. Luna's crying suddenly made perfect sense. "Oh no, the truck is heading toward the bridge road. That's a steep, dangerous stretch." David's face went even paler. "How long ago did you say it passed?" 10 minutes, maybe less. Mrs. Patterson answered. And that little one here, she gestured to Luna, has been beside herself ever since it went by, acting like she knew something was terribly wrong. David looked at Luna, who had finally stopped crying but was still staring at him with intense curiosity. Her small hand reached out toward him, as if she recognized him as someone who could help. "I have to catch up to that truck," David said, putting his helmet back on. "The cub won't survive much longer in that cold, and if the driver hits those turns too fast." He didn't finish the sentence, but they all understood. The mountain road was notorious for its sharp curves and steep drop-offs. Many accidents had happened there over the years, especially when drivers were going too fast or weren't familiar with the terrain. As David revved his motorcycle engine, Luna suddenly let out a series of urgent babbles, reaching toward him with both arms. It was as if she was trying to tell him something important. "Wait," Mia said, surprising herself again. "I'm coming with you." "Ma'am, that might not be safe." "That baby," Mia interrupted, looking down at Luna, whose tears had finally stopped. "She knows something. I can't explain it, but she's been trying to warn us. And I have a feeling you'll need all the help you can get." Mrs. Patterson stepped forward. "I'll come too. I know these roads better than anyone, and I have my truck. We can follow behind the motorcycle in case you need backup." David hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "All right, but we need to move fast. Every second counts." As they prepared to leave, Luna looked up at her mother with eyes that seemed far too wise for an 8-month-old baby. She had stopped crying completely now, as if she knew that help was finally on the way. But there was still something in her expression that made Mia's heart race, a look that said the real danger was yet to come. Down the mountain, Jake Sullivan was completely unaware that a rescue mission was forming behind him. He had turned up the radio and was singing along to an old song, his foot pressing a little harder on the gas pedal as he approached the steepest part of the descent. The truck picked up speed, and in the back, the damaged latch finally gave way with a sharp crack that was lost in the noise of the engine. The rear door swung open just a few inches, but it was enough to let in a rush of cold mountain air. The bear cub stirred weakly, sensing the change, and with the last of its strength let out one more cry for help. That cry, faint as it was, somehow reached Luna's ears even from miles away. The baby suddenly went rigid in Mia's arms, her eyes rolling back slightly, as if she was experiencing something beyond the physical world. For a terrifying moment, Mia thought her daughter was having some kind of seizure. "Luna, baby, what's wrong?" Mia cried out, but then Luna's eyes snapped open, clearer and more focused than ever before. She looked directly at David and made a sound that was unmistakably urgent. Not crying, not babbling, but something that sounded almost like words. David's motorcycle roared to life just as Mrs. Patterson hurried to her old pickup truck. "Follow me," she called to Mia. "I know a shortcut that might get us there faster than the main road." As they prepared to leave, something unexpected happened. Luna's father, Marcus, came running out of the house, having heard the commotion from his home office where he'd been working. "Mia, what's going on? Why is everyone—" He stopped mid-sentence when he saw Luna's expression. His daughter was staring at him with an intensity that made his skin crawl. "What's wrong with her?" "There's a bear cub trapped in a truck," Mia explained quickly, "and somehow Luna knows about it. She's been sensing its distress." Marcus looked skeptical until Luna reached out to him and made the same urgent sound she had made to David. There was something in that sound that bypassed logic and went straight to his heart. Without fully understanding why, Marcus found himself nodding. "I'll drive," he said, taking the keys from Mia. "You hold Luna." Meanwhile, Jake Sullivan was completely lost in his own world, singing along to the radio and thinking about his weekend plans. He had no idea that his truck had become the center of a desperate rescue operation. The refrigerated unit hummed loudly, masking any sounds that might have come from the back. But as he approached a particularly sharp turn known locally as Devil's Curve, something made him glance in his rearview mirror. For just a split second, he thought he saw the back door of his truck swaying. He blinked and looked again, but everything seemed normal. "Must be getting tired," he muttered to himself, but unconsciously he eased up on the gas pedal. In the back of the truck, the bear cub was experiencing something strange. As the cold seeped deeper into its small body, it began to drift in and out of consciousness. In its weakened state, its mind seemed to reach out desperately for any source of warmth or comfort it could find. David raced down the mountain road on his motorcycle, leaning into each curve with practiced skill. He had grown up on these roads and knew every twist and turn by heart. But as he gained speed, a troubling thought crossed his mind. Even if they caught up to the truck, how would they stop it? The driver had no reason to pull over for a stranger on a motorcycle. Behind him, Mrs. Patterson's pickup truck bounced and rattled as she took shortcuts that most people didn't even know existed. She had been driving these mountain roads for over 50 years, and she knew exactly where the refrigerated truck would have to slow down. "There's a steep grade about 3 miles ahead," she explained to Marcus and Mia, who were following close behind in their car. She had insisted they all stay in radio contact using old CB radios she kept in her truck. "The truck will have to gear down for that hill. That's our best chance to catch up." In the back seat, Luna had become strangely calm. She wasn't crying anymore, but her little hands were pressed against the car window, and she kept making soft sounds as if she was trying to communicate with something far away. Mia watched her daughter with growing amazement and concern. "Marcus, I think Luna is connected to that cub somehow. I know it sounds crazy, but look," Marcus interrupted, pointing ahead. In the distance, they could see the white refrigerated truck beginning its descent down the steepest part of the mountain road. David had spotted it too. He gunned his motorcycle engine and began closing the gap between himself and the truck. But as he got closer, he realized the truck was going faster than it should be on such a dangerous stretch of road. Inside the cab, Jake Sullivan was now fully alert. The steep grade was making his truck pick up speed faster than he was comfortable with, and he was having to use his brakes more than usual. The weight of the refrigerated unit was pushing him down the mountain, and he was starting to sweat despite the cool morning air. "Come on, slow down," he muttered, pumping the brakes. But the truck seemed to have a mind of its own, eager to race down the mountain whether he wanted it to or not. Behind him, David was close enough now to see that the rear door of the truck was indeed slightly ajar. A sick feeling settled in his stomach. If the cub fell out at this speed, it wouldn't survive the fall. And if the truck continued to accelerate, it might not make the sharp turns ahead. He pulled up alongside the truck and tried to get Jake's attention by honking his horn and waving, but Jake was too focused on controlling his vehicle to notice the motorcycle. Meanwhile, something extraordinary was happening in the back of the truck. The bear cub, in its semi-conscious state, had somehow established a connection with Luna. It was as if their shared innocence and vulnerability had created a bridge between them that transcended the physical distance. Luna suddenly let out a sharp cry, and at the exact same moment the cub's eyes opened wide. It began to move toward the partially open door, driven by an instinct it didn't understand. "Something's happening," Mia said, her voice tight with worry. She's different. Look at her." Luna's eyes had taken on an almost otherworldly quality. She was staring straight ahead with laser focus, and her little body was tense as if she was concentrating on something incredibly important. Mrs. Patterson's voice crackled over the CB radio. I can see David up ahead. He's trying to get the truck driver's attention, but it doesn't look like it's working. The truck was approaching the most dangerous part of the road now, a series of switchbacks that had claimed several vehicles over the years. Jake knew he needed to slow down, but his brakes were already working harder than they should be. "This isn't good," he said aloud, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel. For the first time since starting his journey, Jake began to wish he had chosen a different route. In that moment of stress and fear, something unexpected happened. Jake thought he heard crying coming from the back of his truck. Not the mechanical sounds he was used to, but something that sounded almost like a baby. He turned the radio down and listened more carefully. There it was again, definitely crying, and it sounded terrified. "What the hell?" Jake said, his eyes widening in shock. David saw the truck beginning to weave slightly and knew that the driver was starting to panic. The motorcycle couldn't do much to help stop a several-ton truck, but he had to try something. He accelerated past the truck and then deliberately slowed down in front of it, hoping to force the driver to brake. Jake saw the motorcycle suddenly appear in front of him and hit his brakes hard. The sudden braking caused a loud thump from the back of the truck, followed by what sounded unmistakably like an animal's cry of pain and fear. Jake's eyes went wide with horror as he realized what was happening. "Oh, God," he whispered. "There's something alive back there." But his realization had come almost too late. The sharp braking had caused the damaged rear door to swing open wider, and the truck was approaching the steepest, most dangerous curve on the entire mountain road. Luna, still sitting in her car seat miles behind the action, suddenly arched her back and let out a scream that seemed to carry all the terror and urgency of the moment. It was as if she had somehow sensed that their rescue mission was about to become a disaster. The bear cub, thrown against the side of the truck by the sudden braking, struggled to its feet on unsteady legs. The door was open wider now, and through the gap, it could see the mountain landscape rushing by. Its survival instincts warred with its weakness and confusion. Should it try to jump from the moving truck? Or should it stay and hope the terrifying ride would end safely? As the truck entered the curve, the cub made a decision that would determine whether it lived or died. It crawled toward the open door, driven by desperation and a mysterious pull that seemed to be calling it toward something warm and safe. But the truck was still moving far too fast for any creature to survive a fall onto the rocky mountain road below. David, still riding ahead of the truck, saw in his mirrors that the rear door was now swinging freely. He knew that within seconds the cub would either fall to its death or the truck would crash trying to navigate the deadly curve ahead. It was then that Luna did something that defied all explanation. Sitting in her car seat miles away, she stopped crying abruptly and smiled. It was a peaceful, knowing smile that seemed to say everything would be all right. At that exact moment, the bear cub felt a sudden sense of calm wash over it. Instead of jumping from the truck, it settled back against the far wall of the cargo hold, as if it somehow knew that help was finally coming. And Jake Sullivan, hearing the animal's cries clearly now, made the only decision he could live with. Instead of trying to navigate the dangerous curve at speed, he carefully guided his truck toward a small pull-out area that he remembered from previous trips down this road. It would be tight and it would be dangerous, but it was their only chance to avoid disaster. The question was, would there be enough room to stop before the road curved back toward the cliff edge? Jake's hands trembled as he fought to control the truck. The pullout was barely wide enough for his vehicle, and gravel scattered loudly as he maneuvered toward it. Behind him, he could hear the animal moving around in distress, and the sound broke his heart. How had he been so careless? How had he not checked his cargo hold before starting this journey? The truck's wheels locked as Jake hit the brakes with all his strength. The vehicle skidded sideways, and for a terrifying moment, Jake thought they were going to slide right off the cliff. But the truck came to a stop just inches from the guardrail, steam rising from the overheated brakes. David pulled up behind the truck on his motorcycle, his heart pounding. He had watched the entire dramatic stop and couldn't believe they had made it safely. He pulled off his helmet and ran toward the back of the truck. "Sir, are you okay?" he called out to Jake, who was still sitting in the cab with his head in his hands, shaking from the adrenaline and shock. Jake slowly climbed out of the truck, his legs unsteady. "There's something in the back," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I heard it crying. How could I not have known?" "It's not your fault," David said quickly, moving toward the rear of the truck. "Let's just focus on getting it out safely." But when they reached the back of the truck, they discovered something that stopped them both in their tracks. The bear cub was there, huddled in the far corner of the cargo hold, but it wasn't alone. Standing protectively in front of the cub was its mother, a massive black bear who had somehow managed to climb into the truck while it was stopped. Her eyes were fixed on the two men, and a low growl rumbled in her chest. "Oh my God," Jake breathed. "How did she—" David's mind raced. The mother bear must have been following the truck, somehow tracking her cub's scent. But bears couldn't run as fast as trucks on mountain roads. Unless— "The shortcut," David said suddenly. She must have known a route through the forest that was faster than the road. The mother bear took a step forward, still growling. David could see that she was torn between protecting her cub and recognizing that these humans might be trying to help. Meanwhile, Mrs. Patterson's pickup truck arrived at the scene, followed closely by Marcus and Mia's car. Luna, who had been strangely calm during the final moments of the chase, suddenly became animated again. She pressed her hands against the window and made excited babbling sounds. "Look at her," Mia said in amazement. "It's like she knows everything's going to be okay now." Mrs. Patterson got out of her truck slowly, her experienced eyes taking in the situation. "That mama bear's scared," she observed. "She doesn't know if we're friend or foe." Marcus parked the car but made no move to get out. The sight of the massive bear was intimidating, even for someone like him who had grown up in mountain country. But Luna had other ideas. Before anyone could stop her, she had somehow managed to unbuckle herself from her car seat and was crawling toward the car door. "Luna, no!" Mia cried, but the baby was surprisingly quick. She had pushed the door handle down and was tumbling out of the car before anyone could react. "Catch her!" Marcus shouted, but Luna was already on the ground, crawling rapidly toward the truck. The mother bear heard the commotion and turned to see the small human baby approaching. For a moment, everyone held their breath, expecting the worst. But instead of becoming more aggressive, the bear seemed to relax slightly. Luna reached the back of the truck and pulled herself up to a standing position using the tailgate for support. She looked up at the mother bear with no fear whatsoever, just curiosity and something that looked almost like recognition. The bear cub, sensing a change in its mother's mood, peeked out from behind her massive form. When it saw Luna, it made a soft chirping sound, the same sound that Luna had been making throughout the morning. David watched in awe as baby and cub seemed to communicate without words. Luna reached out her tiny hand, and the cub, overcoming its fear, took a tentative step forward. "This is incredible," David whispered to Jake. "I've never seen anything like this." But the miraculous moment was interrupted by a new sound, the roar of approaching vehicles. Several cars were coming up the mountain road, and they weren't slowing down. Mrs. Patterson squinted into the distance. "Those look like park ranger vehicle," she said, "and wildlife control trucks." Jake's face went pale. "If they see the bears, they'll tranquilize them." Or worse, David's mind raced. We need to get the bears back into the forest before the rangers arrive, but the mother won't leave while she thinks the cub is in danger." It was then that Luna did something that none of them would ever forget. She began to sing, not words, but a soft melodic humming that seemed to echo through the mountain air. The sound was hauntingly beautiful, like a lullaby that spoke to something primal and ancient. The mother bear stopped growling entirely. Her head tilted to one side as she listened to Luna's song. The cub took another step forward, drawn by the peaceful melody. Slowly, carefully, Luna moved closer to the cub. The mother bear watched but didn't interfere. It was as if she understood that this tiny human child posed no threat to her baby. When Luna was close enough, she gently placed her small hand on the cub's head. The cub leaned into her touch, finally warm and safe after its terrifying ordeal. But the moment of peace was shattered by the sound of screeching brakes. 3 park ranger vehicles had arrived at the scene, and uniformed officers were already getting out, some carrying tranquilizer guns. "Everyone step back," one of the rangers shouted. "We have a dangerous situation here." "No, wait," David called out, but it was too late. The sudden noise and commotion had spooked the mother bear. She reared up on her hind legs, protecting both her cub and Luna, who was still standing next to the baby bear. The lead ranger raised his tranquilizer gun, but Mrs. Patterson stepped in front of him. "Hold on there, young man," she said firmly. "That bear isn't being aggressive, she's protecting." "Ma'am, please step aside. We have protocols." "Your protocols don't account for this," Mrs. Patterson interrupted, gesturing toward Luna and the cub. Everyone watched in stunned silence as Luna stood up on unsteady legs and walked back toward her parents, the bear cub following closely behind her. The mother bear lowered herself back down to all fours, but stayed close, watching every movement. Marcus and Mia rushed toward their daughter, but Luna held up a tiny hand as if telling them to stop. She turned back to the cub one last time and made that same soft sound they had been hearing all morning. The cub responded with its own gentle chirp, and then, to everyone's amazement, it walked back to its mother and nuzzled against her fur. The mother bear looked at Luna one last time, and for a brief moment their eyes met. There was something in that exchange that spoke of understanding, of gratitude, of a connection that transcended species. Then, without any further hesitation, the mother bear turned and led her cub toward the edge of the forest. They disappeared into the trees as quietly as they had appeared, leaving behind only the memory of an impossible moment. The lead ranger lowered his weapon, his face filled with confusion and wonder. "In 20 years of wildlife management," he said slowly, "I have never seen anything like that." David knelt down in front of Luna, who was now back in her mother's arms. "Thank you, little one," he said softly. "I don't know how you did it, but you saved that cub's life." Luna looked at him with those wise eyes that seemed far too old for such a young child. She reached out and touched his face gently, then smiled and settled back into her mother's embrace. Jake Sullivan approached the group, his face still pale from shock. "I need to make some calls," he said, "report what happened. I could have killed that bear family with my carelessness." "It wasn't carelessness," Mrs. Patterson said kindly. "Sometimes things happen that are beyond our control. What matters is how we handle them when they do." As the group began to disperse, plans were made to ensure that Jake's truck was properly inspected before continuing his journey. The rangers decided to monitor the area to make sure the bear family was safely back in their territory. But there was one more surprise waiting for them. As they prepared to leave, a new vehicle arrived at the scene. A smaller truck with the logo of the local news station. A reporter and cameraman jumped out, apparently having heard about the rescue on the police scanner. "Excuse me," the reporter called out, approaching the group with a microphone. "We heard there was some kind of incident with a bear cub and a truck. Can anyone tell us what happened?" David stepped forward, ready to handle the media attention. But before he could speak, Luna let out a happy squeal and pointed toward the forest. Everyone turned to look, and there, just at the edge of the tree line, the mother bear and her cub had reappeared. They stood watching the group for a long moment, and then the cub did something extraordinary. It stood up on its hind legs and waved at Luna. Luna waved back, giggling with delight. The reporter stood with his mouth open, not believing what he was seeing. The cameraman, however, was recording everything. "Did you get that?" the reporter whispered. "Every second of it," the cameraman replied, his voice filled with awe. As the bears disappeared into the forest for the final time, Luna settled back into her mother's arms with a satisfied sigh. The mysterious connection that had driven the entire morning's events seemed to fade, leaving behind only the memory of something magical. But one question remained. How had Luna known? How had she sensed the cub's distress from so far away? And how had she been able to calm both the cub and its fierce mother with nothing more than her presence and her innocent song? The adults would spend years trying to understand what had happened that day on the mountain road. But for Luna, it was simple. She had heard someone who needed help, and she had done what felt right. Sometimes the purest hearts see solutions that elude the most complex minds. And sometimes love and innocence can bridge any gap, even the one between species. As they drove back up the mountain toward home, Luna fell asleep in her car seat, a peaceful smile on her face. She would grow up with no memory of this day, but its impact would follow her for the rest of her life. The bear cub and its mother would thrive in the forest, their bond stronger than ever after their shared ordeal. And every now and then, when the wind was just right, locals would swear they could hear the sound of a baby humming somewhere in the woods, a gentle melody that spoke of friendship, hope, and the miraculous connections that bind all living things together. But the story was far from over. 2 days after the incredible rescue, strange things began happening in Cedar Valley. Mia first noticed it when she was giving Luna her morning bath. The baby, who normally loved splashing in the water, seemed distracted, constantly looking toward the window that faced the forest. "What is it, sweetheart?" Mia asked, following Luna's gaze. Through the window, she could see nothing unusual, just the familiar line of pine trees that bordered their property. But Luna saw something different. She pointed excitedly and made the same soft humming sound she had used to calm the bears. Mia felt a chill run down her spine. Was her daughter still connected to the bear family somehow? Meanwhile, David from the Wildlife Center had been having dreams that he couldn't explain. Night after night, he saw images of the forest from a bear's perspective, walking through dense undergrowth, smelling scents that were impossibly rich and complex, feeling the earth beneath massive paws. He would wake up exhausted, as if he had been walking for hours. The dreams were so vivid that he decided to investigate. David knew the general area where the bear family had disappeared into the forest, and he felt drawn to explore it further. What he discovered there would change everything they thought they knew about what had happened on the mountain road. Deep in the woods, about a mile from where the rescue had taken place, David found something extraordinary. There was a clearing that he had never seen before, despite having worked in these mountains for years. In the center of the clearing was a natural spring, its water so clear it looked like glass. But it wasn't the spring that made David's heart race. It was the flowers. The entire clearing was filled with flowers that shouldn't have been blooming at this time of year, and some that he had never seen before. They seemed to glow with their own inner light, and the air around them shimmered as if charged with electricity. David took out his phone to photograph the phenomenon, but when he looked at the pictures later, they showed only an ordinary forest clearing with normal wildflowers. It was as if the camera couldn't capture what his eyes were seeing. He spent hours in the clearing, taking notes and trying to understand what he was witnessing. As the sun began to set, he prepared to leave, but then he heard it, the same humming sound that Luna had made to calm the bears. David froze. The sound was coming from somewhere in the trees, but it wasn't Luna. It was something else, something that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. He followed the sound deeper into the forest, and what he found defied every scientific principle he had ever learned. In a small grove surrounded by ancient oak trees, the mother bear and her cub were sitting peacefully beside a young woman David had never seen before. She appeared to be in her 20s, with long dark hair and clothes that looked like they belonged to another century. The woman was singing the same melody that Luna had hummed, and the bears listened as if they understood every note. When she finished, she turned to David with eyes that seemed both young and impossibly old. "You're the one who helped save the little one," she said, her voice carrying a slight accent that David couldn't place. David's mouth felt dry. Who are you?" The woman smiled. "I have many names. Some call me the Bridge Walker. Others know me as the voice between worlds, but you can call me Elena." She stood gracefully, and David noticed that her feet barely seemed to touch the ground. "I've been waiting for you, David. There's something you need to understand about what happened 2 days ago." "I don't understand any of this," David said, his scientific mind struggling to process what he was seeing. Elena walked closer, and as she did, David felt a strange sense of peace wash over him. "Luna is not an ordinary child," she explained. "She was born with a gift that appears only once in several generations. She can hear the voices of those who cannot speak for themselves, animals, trees, even the earth itself. But she's just a baby," David protested. "Age means nothing when it comes to gifts of the spirit," Elena replied. "The bear cub called out to her across the miles, and she heard. More than that, she answered." The bear cub, as if responding to the mention of its name, made a soft chirping sound and looked directly at David. There was an intelligence in its eyes that seemed far beyond what any animal should possess. "What's happening to me?" David asked. "The dreams, this place, none of it makes sense." Elena smiled again. "You've been touched by Luna's gift. When she used her ability to connect with the bears, she opened a bridge between their world and yours. That bridge is still open, and it's changing you." David felt dizzy. "Changing me how?" "You'll start to understand animals in ways you never have before. Your work at the Wildlife Center will become more intuitive, more successful. But with this gift comes responsibility." "What kind of responsibility?" Elena gestured to the bears who had been listening to their conversation with what seemed like complete understanding. "There are others like the cub who will need help. Luna is too young to answer every call, but you can be her voice in the adult world." Before David could ask more questions, Elena began to fade, becoming translucent like morning mist. "Wait," David called out. "I need to understand more." "You will," Elena's voice echoed as if from a great distance. "Trust in what your heart tells you, and watch over Luna. She'll need protectors as her gift grows stronger." With that, Elena disappeared entirely, leaving David alone with the 2 bears. They looked at him for a long moment, and then the mother bear did something that made David's knees weak. She bowed her massive head to him in what could only be described as a gesture of respect. Then they too melted back into the forest, leaving David standing alone in the grove, wondering if he had imagined the entire encounter. But he knew he hadn't. The changes Elena had spoken of were already beginning. As he walked back through the forest, David could hear things he had never heard before. The whispered conversations of squirrels in the trees, the worried chatter of birds discussing a sick nestling, the deep, slow thoughts of the ancient oaks themselves. Meanwhile, back in Cedar Valley, other strange events were unfolding. Mrs. Patterson had woken up that morning to find her garden completely transformed. Overnight, every plant had flourished as if touched by magic. Her tomatoes were the size of melons, her flowers bloomed with colors she had never seen before, and her herb garden smelled so incredible that neighbors stopped on the sidewalk just to breathe in the fragrance. "I've been gardening for 60 years, she told her friend Martha over the phone, "and I've never seen anything like this. It's like something blessed my garden while I slept." Jake Sullivan was experiencing changes too. Since the incident with the bear cub, he had felt compelled to donate money and time to wildlife causes. More strangely, animals seemed drawn to him now. Stray dogs followed him home. Birds perched on his truck while he was making deliveries. And he had even found a family of raccoons sleeping peacefully in his garage. "It's like they know I helped one of their own," he told his wife. "I can't explain it, but I feel responsible for them somehow." Marcus and Mia noticed that Luna was becoming more alert and responsive than any 8-month-old should be. She seemed to understand conversations, reacted to emotions with uncanny accuracy, and had begun making specific sounds for different things. One sound for when she was hungry, another for when she wanted to go outside, and a special melodic hum that she made when any animal was nearby. "It's almost like she's trying to talk to them," Mia observed, watching Luna coo at a butterfly that had landed on her windowsill. "Maybe she is," Marcus replied thoughtfully. The most dramatic change, however, was happening to the reporter who had witnessed Luna's interaction with the bears. Sarah Martinez had been a skeptical, hard-nosed journalist for 15 years, but something about what she had seen that day had shaken her to her core. The footage her cameraman had captured was extraordinary, but when she tried to share it with her editor, she found that she couldn't bring herself to do it. Every time she sat down to write the story, the words wouldn't come. It was as if something was protecting the secret of what had really happened on that mountain road. Instead, Sarah found herself drawn back to Cedar Valley again and again. She rented a small cabin just outside of town and began investigating the history of the area. What she discovered in the local library's archives would have shocked anyone else, but after what she had witnessed, Sarah was prepared to believe almost anything. According to records dating back to the 1800s, Cedar Valley had always been a place where unusual things happened. There were accounts of animals behaving strangely, unexplained healings, and children who seemed to possess abilities beyond the normal range of human experience. One journal entry from 1897 particularly caught Sarah's attention. It was written by a local doctor who described treating a young girl who had been found in the forest, apparently raised by a family of wolves. "The child displays an extraordinary ability to communicate with animals," the doctor had written. "She seems to understand their needs and can calm even the most frightened or aggressive creatures with nothing more than her voice. Local residents speak of her as if she were blessed or cursed, depending on one's perspective." The entry went on to describe how the girl had eventually integrated into human society, but had spent her life helping animals and those who cared for them. She never married, never had children of her own, but was remembered as someone who bridged the gap between the human and animal worlds. Sarah couldn't help but wonder if Luna might be a descendant of this mysterious girl, or if there was something about Cedar Valley itself that created these special children. Her research was interrupted by a knock at her cabin door. When she opened it, she found David standing on her porch, his face pale, and his eyes filled with a mixture of excitement and fear. "I need to talk to someone," he said without preamble. and you're the only person I can think of who might believe what I have to say." Sarah invited him in and made coffee, while David told her about his encounter with Elena and the strange changes he had been experiencing. As he spoke, Sarah felt pieces of a larger puzzle falling into place. "There's something I need to show you," she said when he finished. She brought out the historical documents she had been studying and spread them across her small kitchen table. David read through them with growing amazement. "So this has happened before?" "Multiple times," Sarah confirmed. "Every few generations, someone like Luna appears in Cedar Valley. They're always children, always have this connection to animals, and they always change the lives of everyone around them." "But what does it mean?" David asked. "Why here? Why now?" Sarah was about to answer when they were both startled by a sound outside the cabin. It was the same humming melody that had become so familiar to them, Luna's song. They rushed to the window and looked out into the twilight. There, in the clearing in front of the cabin, stood Luna with her parents. The baby was no longer in Mia's arms but was standing on her own, which should have been impossible for an 8-month-old. But that wasn't the most shocking part. Surrounding Luna and her family were dozens of animals: deer, rabbits, squirrels, and even a family of foxes. They formed a perfect circle around the little family, all of them swaying gently as Luna hummed her mysterious song. And at the edge of the forest, barely visible in the growing darkness, Sarah could make out 2 familiar shapes. The mother bear and her cub had returned, drawn by Luna's call. David and Sarah watched in silent awe as Luna raised her tiny hands toward the sky. The animals all looked up with her, and in that moment, something extraordinary happened. The stars seemed to pulse in rhythm with Luna's humming, and a soft golden light began to emanate from the child herself. The light spread outward, touching each animal in the circle, and then continued expanding until it encompassed the entire valley. For just a moment, Sarah felt as if she could understand the thoughts and feelings of every living creature in Cedar Valley. She sensed the contentment of the animals, the protective love of Luna's parents, the wonder and responsibility that David was feeling, and underneath it all, the deep, ancient wisdom of the land itself. Then the light faded, Luna's humming stopped, and the animals quietly dispersed back into the forest. Luna collapsed into her father's arms, apparently exhausted by whatever had just happened. As Marcus and Mia carried their daughter back toward town, David and Sarah stood in stunned silence. "Did we really just see that?" Sarah whispered. David nodded slowly. "I think we just witnessed something that most people would never believe." "But why us? Why were we chosen to see this?" David thought about Elena's words about responsibility and protection. Maybe because Luna is going to need people who understand what she is, people who can help protect her secret and guide her as she grows up. Sarah looked at the historical documents still spread across her table. According to these records, the children like Luna don't usually live ordinary lives. They become healers, protectors of nature, bridges between worlds. "That's a heavy burden for any child," David said quietly. "Which is why she needs us," Sarah replied with growing conviction. "All of us. You, me, her family, even Jake and Mrs. Patterson. We all played a part in saving the bear cub, and now we're all connected to Luna's story." Over the following weeks, this group of unlikely allies began to form a secret circle of protection around Luna and her family. They met regularly at Sarah's cabin to share observations and experiences related to Luna's growing abilities. Mrs. Patterson reported that her garden had become a gathering place for animals from all over the valley. "It's like they know it's a safe space," she explained. Sometimes I look out my window and see 20 different species just coexisting peacefully in my backyard. Jake had started volunteering at the Wildlife Center, working closely with David to help injured and orphaned animals. "It's the strangest thing," Jake told the group. "It's like I can sense what they need before they even show symptoms. Last week, I insisted on x-raying a hawk that seemed fine to everyone else. Turned out it had a hairline fracture in its wing that would have gotten much worse if we hadn't caught it early." Marcus and Mia shared stories of Luna's continuing development. She was now walking confidently despite being barely 9 months old, and she had developed a vocabulary of sorts. Different sounds for different animals, different melodies for different emotions. "Yesterday, she made a sound I'd never heard before," Mia told the group. "It was urgent, almost panicked. We followed her outside, and she led us to Mrs. Henderson's cat, which had gotten stuck in a drainage pipe. How could she have known that from inside the house?" Marcus added, shaking his head in wonder. David had an answer to that, though it was one that still amazed him. "I think Luna can sense any creature in distress within about a 5-mile radius. It's like she has a psychic connection to the animal kingdom in this entire valley." But their protective circle around Luna was about to face its first real test. Unknown to any of them, word of the unusual events in Cedar Valley had begun to spread beyond their small community. Dr. Amanda Reeves, a researcher specializing in unusual psychological phenomena, had caught wind of the story through a colleague who had seen Sarah's unused news footage. Dr. Reeves was the kind of scientist who made her career by debunking claims of the supernatural, and she saw Luna as her next big case. Dr. Reeves had already contacted Mia and Marcus under the guise of a routine child development study, asking if she could observe Luna for her research. The request had seemed innocent enough, but David had a bad feeling about it. "We need to be careful," he warned the group at their next meeting. "If the wrong people find out about Luna's abilities, they could try to study her, exploit her, or worse." "What kind of worse?" Sarah asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. David had been doing research of his own into children with unusual abilities. There are government agencies, private research facilities, pharmaceutical companies, all kinds of organizations that would love to get their hands on someone like Luna. They'd want to run tests, try to duplicate her abilities, maybe even use her as some kind of weapon. The group sat in shocked silence, contemplating this threat to the child they had all come to love and protect. "So, what do we do?" Mrs. Patterson asked finally. "We watch, we wait, and we're ready to act if necessary," David replied. "Luna is going to need us now more than ever." As if responding to their conversation, a familiar humming drifted through the cabin's open window. They all looked outside to see Luna, once again standing alone in the clearing, surrounded by her circle of animal friends. But this time, something was different. The animals seemed agitated, restless. Luna's humming had a worried quality to it, as if she was trying to calm not just them, but herself. "She knows," Sarah said quietly. "Somehow she knows that danger is coming." David stood up, his decision made. "Then we'd better be ready for it." The battle for Luna's freedom was about to begin, and none of them knew exactly what they were up against. But they were united in their determination to protect the special child who had brought them all together and changed their lives forever. Outside, Luna's humming grew stronger, and the animals pressed closer to her, as if forming a protective barrier. Whatever was coming, they would face it together, human and animal, ordinary people and an extraordinary child, all bound by an unbreakable bond forged on a mountain road when a baby's love saved a bear cub's life. The night deepened around Cedar Valley, but Luna's song continued to float through the darkness like a golden thread connecting every living thing. As David, Sarah, and the others watched from the cabin window, something miraculous began to happen. The golden light that had appeared before started emanating from Luna again, but this time it was different. Instead of spreading outward, it began to spiral upward into the star-filled sky, creating a luminous column that seemed to reach beyond the clouds. One by one, animals from all corners of the valley began to emerge from the forest. Not just the usual forest creatures, but species that should never have been found in these mountains. A family of wolves, an elderly elk with magnificent antlers, even a pair of eagles that circled overhead in perfect synchronization. Luna's humming evolved into something more complex, a harmony that seemed to incorporate the voices of all the creatures around her. The mother bear and her cub stepped forward from the crowd of animals and positioned themselves directly beside Luna, as if they were her guardians. Dr. Amanda Reeves, who had been secretly observing from a hidden location in the forest, stepped into the clearing with a portable recording device and several infrared cameras. Her scientific skepticism had completely dissolved in the face of what she was witnessing. "This isn't possible," she whispered to herself. But her equipment was capturing everything. That's when Elena appeared one final time, materializing between Luna and the scientist like morning mist taking human form. "Dr. Reeves," Elena said, her voice carrying across the clearing with supernatural clarity. "You came here seeking to understand, to prove or disprove, but some things cannot be contained in laboratories or explained in research papers." The doctor fumbled with her equipment, trying to record Elena's appearance, but her devices showed only empty space where the mysterious woman stood. "What is she?" Dr. Reeves asked, pointing toward Luna. "What kind of genetic anomaly could create these abilities?" Elena smiled sadly. "She is not an anomaly. She is a reminder of what humanity once was, before we forgot how to listen to the voices of our fellow beings. Luna represents hope. Hope that the connection between all living things can be restored." The golden light emanating from Luna suddenly expanded, washing over Dr. Reeves. For a moment, the scientist felt what Luna felt, the heartbeat of every creature in the forest, the slow wisdom of the ancient trees, the pure joy of existence that flowed through all life. Dr. Reeves fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. All her years of cold, analytical research seemed meaningless compared to this moment of pure connection. "I understand now," she whispered. "She doesn't need to be studied. She needs to be protected." Elena nodded. "Will you help them protect her?" Without hesitation, Dr. Reeves nodded. "With my life." As Elena began to fade for the final time, she turned to address all the assembled humans and animals. "Luna's gift will grow stronger as she does, but she will never be alone. Each of you has been changed by her presence, and that change will ripple outward, touching others who are ready to remember the old connections." David stepped forward from the cabin. "What about the bear cub? Will we see them again?" Elena's laughter sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "The cub was never just a bear. It was a test, a catalyst. Look closely." Everyone turned their attention to the small bear cub beside its mother. As they watched, the cub began to change, growing not larger but somehow more radiant. Its eyes, already intelligent, now seemed to hold depths of wisdom that spoke of ancient knowledge. "The cub is like Luna," Elena explained. "A bridge between worlds. They are bound together now, protector and protected, human and wild. As Luna grows, so will the cub's understanding of both realms." Luna stopped humming and took an unsteady step toward the bear cub. The young bear met her halfway, and when they touched, baby hand to furry paw, A pulse of pure white light spread through the entire valley. In that instant, every person present was filled with a profound understanding. They would never speak openly about what they had witnessed, but they would carry the knowledge with them always. More importantly, they would form an invisible network of protection around Luna, ensuring that she could grow up safely while learning to use her extraordinary gift. Marcus and Mia approached the circle and gently lifted Luna into their arms. She was exhausted from the night's events, but her face glowed with peaceful contentment. "Will she remember any of this when she's older?" Mia asked Elena. "She will remember what she needs to remember," Elena replied. "And when the time comes for her to fully understand her purpose, you will all be there to guide her." As Luna settled into sleep in her mother's arms, the assembled animals began to disperse back into the forest. The mother bear and her cub were among the last to leave, but before they disappeared into the trees, the cub turned back one final time. In a voice that was somehow both animal and human, young and ancient, the cub spoke its first and only words, "Thank you, sister." Then they were gone, leaving behind only the memory of their presence and the knowledge that they would return when needed. Dr. Reeves approached the group, her sophisticated equipment forgotten in the grass. "I came here to expose a hoax," she said quietly. "Instead, I found something that's changed everything I thought I knew about the world." Mrs. Patterson patted the younger woman's shoulder kindly. "That happens to most folks who meet our Luna. The question is, what do you plan to do with that knowledge?" Dr. Reeves looked around at the circle of faces. People who had been strangers to each other just days ago, but were now bound together by shared purpose and wonder. "I'd like to stay," she said, "if you'll have me. Luna is going to need someone who understands the scientific community, someone who can deflect unwanted attention and discredit any researchers who might come looking for her." David extended his hand to her. "Welcome to the family." As the group walked back toward town together, Sarah looked up at the stars, which seemed brighter than they had ever been before. "You know, I came here to write a news story, but some stories are too important to share with the world." "The best stories usually are," Jake agreed, his arm around his wife as they brought up the rear of the group. Years passed peacefully in Cedar Valley. Luna grew into a remarkable child who could calm the fiercest storm and heal the deepest wounds, not just in animals but in the hearts of people who had forgotten how to hope. The bear cub, true to Elena's words, grew alongside her, becoming a guardian of the forest who ensured that the delicate balance between human and wild was never disturbed. David's Wildlife Center became known throughout the region for its miraculous success rate, though he never revealed the true source of his insights. Mrs. Patterson's garden became an unofficial sanctuary where injured and lost animals came to heal. Jake transformed his delivery business into a wildlife transport service, helping to relocate endangered animals to safer habitats. Sarah became a writer of children's books that taught young readers about the importance of protecting nature and listening to the voices of all living things. Dr. Reeves used her position in the scientific community to redirect research funds toward conservation efforts and to discredit any studies that might threaten the privacy of gifted children like Luna. And Marcus and Mia raised their extraordinary daughter with patience, love, and the understanding that she belonged not just to them, but to the world itself. On quiet evenings, when the wind was just right, the people of Cedar Valley could still hear Luna's humming drifting across the mountains. It was a sound that spoke of hope, of connections that transcended species and understanding, and of the miraculous truth that love, pure, innocent, and fearless, could indeed change the world. The bear cub had been saved by a baby's shocking compassion, but in saving it, Luna had saved something far more precious, the ancient bond between humanity and the natural world. And in a time when such connections seemed lost forever, that was perhaps the most shocking miracle of all. In the deepest part of the forest, where the oldest trees whispered secrets to the wind, a mother bear and her grown cub would sometimes sit together under the stars. And if a traveler happened to pass by on such a night, they might hear what sounded like quiet conversation, a gentle exchange between two beings who had learned that love transcends all boundaries, and that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe comes from the purest heart. The story that began with a baby's tears on a mountain morning had become a legend that would be passed down through generations, not as a tale of impossibility, but as a reminder of what becomes possible when we remember how to truly listen and how to love without reservation or fear. Luna's song continued to echo through the valley, an eternal melody of hope that would never fade, ensuring that the bridge between worlds would always remain strong for those brave enough to cross it. And in the end, that bridge became not just a connection between human and animal, but between the world as it was and the world as it could be. A world where shocking compassion could indeed move mountains, stop trucks, and change everything. The miracle on the mountain road was never forgotten, but more importantly, it was never finished. Each day brought new opportunities for kindness, new chances to listen, and new possibilities for love to work its quiet magic in the hearts of all who were willing to believe in the extraordinary power of an innocent soul. And somewhere in the forest, a bear cub who had once been saved by a baby's song grew strong and wise, carrying within its heart the eternal knowledge that sometimes the smallest gestures of love create the biggest changes of all.